Ja, meine sehr verehrten
Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, dear Simon, a very warm welcome back to Berlin. You know, these days, even foreign ministers don't get that many guests that they can see personally. So this is a contribution against the loneliness of foreign ministers, or the trend towards loneliness of foreign ministers these days. Actually, there are many things that bring you here today. But what was really the reason for your visit here is that on the 1st of January, Ireland will take up its seat as a non-permanent member on the Security Council of the United Nations. Thus, in a way, we're handing over the baton to you today. And we are pleased to know that with Ireland, there will be a strong voice speaking on behalf of the European Union in the Security Council. We, Germany, can look back on 2 very intensive years when we took up our membership, non-permanent membership of the Security Council. The situation was anything but easy. The Council was blocked in a number of issues, but we made best use of the influence we had to bring to bear wherever we could. Libya and Sudan are but 2 examples of that. In these and other conflicts, it has always been important to us throughout those 2 years to make human rights, men and women and their rights our absolute priority. We've been able to enshrine the protection against sexual violence in a resolution, and we've also made sure that the Security Council can focus regularly on one of the major issues of the day, climate change, something that was quite new for the Security Council. Dear Simon, we are very grateful for the fact that Ireland is going to continue to focus on these issues and topics. As you may know, many meetings of the Security Council these days take place as VTCs. And during Germany's period when we were in the presidency's chair of the Security Council in July, I wasn't able to travel to New York. What we did instead was acquire a gavel, which would allow me to virtually steer the discussions and the sessions. And those who know the rules of the game know that there's always a gavel there indicating the end of a speaker's speaking time. And perhaps I may offer it to you as a kind of lucky charm. The original will be available to you. It's there in New York, and it will be at your disposal when Ireland will take over as a non-permanent member in the chair of the Security Council. Hopefully there will not only be virtual conferences for you to steer, but whenever there will be a virtual conference of VTC, please feel free to use this gavel. I cannot give it to you personally now because it has to be disinfected first. It's really terrible these days, but it might serve as a kind of small lucky charm for your term in office. Of course, we're also going to talk about a number of other issues today, of course, about the current European issues of the day. We are pleased about the fact that yesterday, or rather this night, we've succeeded in reaching agreement on the rule of law mechanism. We, the presidency of the European Union Council, have worked hard to achieve a compromise. It was hard fought for. However, it is not cause for cheers of triumph. I am convinced that this instrument that we have established is anything but a paper tiger. It is going to bear its teeth quite quickly. And let's not forget that this agreement that was reached in the Council was urgently required in the interest of Europe, in the interest of Europe's citizens and companies who still suffer direly from the pandemic's consequences, and that are in urgent need of the funds from the EU's budget and the Corona recovery package. Today, we will undoubtedly also touch upon the present state of negotiations regarding Brexit. We're witnessing a genuine marathon here, and the finishing straight seems to be extending further and further the longer we wait. And thus, I would like to use this opportunity to express my gratitude and my sincere respect to Michel Barnier and his team, who have been engaging in untiring efforts for an agreement. Allow me to remind you of the following 4 points. We believe that an agreement is difficult, but it is still possible, and thus the European Union will continue to negotiate as long as the window might be even tiny or slightly ajar for a solution. Secondly, we want an agreement that makes sense, that is in the interest of the citizens of the European Union, but also in the interests of the British people. And I think that it is possible. We, and that's my third point, however, have made preparations in case there should not be an agreement. On Wednesday, the EU Commission published its emergency or contingency plannings for the scenario of a no-deal 2.0. Should the negotiations fail, Great Britain and the EU will continue to be partners and friends, and it will be our responsibility to make sure that should that eventuality arise, this point is being impressed upon people quite clearly. We all know that Ireland is much harder hit from the Brexit than any other country member of the European Union. Thus, it has always been important for me to maintain close contact with you in Dublin, and this is even the more important now in this final stage of negotiations. Thank you for coming here, and I look forward to discussions with you.
Thank you very much, Heiko, and I'm delighted to be here today to continue discussions in so many areas. About 2.5 years ago, we stood together in Dublin to announce the publication of a strategy for Ireland in Germany. A key recommendation of that strategy was for us to increase our cooperation on EU affairs. This was also an important element in the joint action plan that we agreed later that year. Looking back over those last 2 years, I think we can be very happy that the Irish-German relationship, I think, is probably stronger now than it has been at any other point that I can remember in history. Ireland opened a new consulate general in Frankfurt in 2019, and we have doubled the size of our embassy here in Berlin over the last couple of years. We're partners at the heart of the European Union and working closely on a whole range of issues, some bilaterally and some together in the context of EU membership. I'm delighted to support what you've said on Brexit. We are, of course, the country that is most impacted, along with the UK itself, of course, in terms of the change that's coming as a result of the decision of the British people to leave the European Union. We do, though, still believe it's possible to get a deal on a future relationship and on a trade agreement. We believe it's possible to do that in a way that protects EU interests, the integrity of our single market, ensuring that we have free but also fair trade and competition in the future, and also respecting Britain's insistence on being treated as an independent sovereign country outside of the European Union. Both can be achieved. We also have to find a way of getting an agreement on fishing, which is a difficult issue which both sides have very, very strong views on. But we need to find a way of designing a middle ground that can allow both move forward satisfied that the negotiations have been fair. I think the key thing on Brexit is that we shouldn't see this through the prism of winners and losers. What's needed is an agreement around a partnership for the future that's good for the EU, that protects our core interests, our single market and our customs union, but respects that we are designing a new but hopefully positive relationship and partnership with an independent sovereign Britain in the future. And for my country, because our relationship is so intertwined with our closest neighbour, the change that's coming is perhaps most difficult to accommodate in terms of preparations. But we are as ready as we can be, in truth, for all outcomes of these negotiations. But let's hope, on top of all of the challenges that we face together in the context of COVID and building a post-COVID economy, that Britain will be a partner of the European Union, working together with us, as opposed to a friend that is moving in a different direction on the back of a failed negotiation and the blame game and the acrimony that would follow. Ireland takes up its seat on the UN Security Council 3 weeks from today. And I want to pay tribute to Germany and to Heiko himself in particular for efforts and successes over the past 2 years. I know that you recently addressed the Bundestag about Germany's term on the Council, and you remarked on the challenging atmosphere you faced on many issues. It is indeed a difficult arena at this time, one that has made your achievements there all the more vital to try to provide stability and rational argument in the context of a very difficult global political landscape. Cooperation between our two countries at UN level is also flourishing, in part because we share a conviction that the solutions to global challenges can really only be found through multilateralism and multilateral structures. These will be our guiding principles too as we enter the Security Council. As a small state, we depend on a global rules-based order, and the UN is at the heart of our foreign policy. It has been for many decades. We have our own unique strengths and perspectives as a small nation, and we will of course bring them to the Council. But we are also an EU proud member state, and we will bring that perspective as well. We're committed to being an active member of the Council, and we'll be guided by 3 core principles, which really was the argument that we made when we looked for support from other UN member states. We want to focus on building peace and peacekeeping and the mandates around that, strengthening conflict prevention, and ensuring accountability for both state and non-state actors when that's appropriate at a UN level. Ireland has a proud history of UN peacekeeping, and you'll know that in Germany, including an unbroken deployment of UN peacekeepers since 1958. And we want to improve, as I said, peacekeeping mandates and strengthen the link between peacekeeping and peace building, which is something that I know the UN General Secretary wants to focus on too. Like other Council members, we want to address the underlying causes of conflict and tackle the clear link between hunger and conflict, and indeed between climate and conflict increasingly. We also want to emphasize the importance of an inclusive approach to building peace, including through women, peace and security, and that agenda which is gathering strength within the UN. These are areas where Germany has made a very important contribution in recent years. We want to be actively engaged on the humanitarian situation in Syria and support the political process underway, contributed to significantly by German leadership in the context of Libya right now and the Berlin process. And we aim to make a contribution to uphold the Iranian nuclear agreement, the JCPOA, also in keeping with our tradition of support for disarmament and non-proliferation. And again, we want to work closely with Germany and seek their guidance on that brief also. Ireland believes African perspectives should be taken into account a lot more when discussing African issues at the UN, and indeed within the European Union too at times. And we want to seek and develop closer partnerships with the African Union itself. We have a strong and consistent record on the promotion of human rights and accountability, including support for the International Criminal Court and the fight to end impunity, which we will take into the Council, and which, if we're honest, the Council does not have a good record on, particularly in the last decade or so. But we're under no illusions. Deep divisions exist in the Council, and making progress on some of these files will be both frustrating and challenging, as I'm sure Heiko can attest to.
Of course.
We will play our part, though, to do everything we can to build trust between members of the Security Council in an effort to find progressive ways forward. So I'm pleased to take the hammer or the baton from Germany today and commit Ireland to being an active, principled and constructive member of the Security Council. We have been privileged to be on the Security Council once every 20 years since the 1960s. And I can assure you that when we get the privilege of sitting around that table, trying to influence world affairs, we take that absolutely seriously, and we are putting the resources behind ensuring that Ireland will be as impactful as we possibly can be as an independent thinker, but also as an EU member state working in partnership with friends and colleagues across the European Union. And so I hope we'll be able to make an impact working with you, Heiko, taking your advice and guidance on many issues. But I hope at the end of our 2-year term we will be able to show as much progress as Germany has over the last 2 years. And we will be able to build on the work that you've done on many of these key files, particularly around women, peace and security, particularly around climate and the security issues that flow from that, which is not accepted by some member states on the Security Council yet. And I think we can do that, I hope, in a way that is non-confrontational and brings people together rather than drives them apart. So thank you, and it's great to be in Berlin. Like you say, it's really bizarre to be a foreign minister at the moment, because foreign ministers that can't travel find it frustrating, to put it mildly. We are in this job to try and change the world for the better. And when we have to do that over video conference facilities, it certainly isn't as easy to build the kind of relationships that are needed to bring agendas forward. So that's why I was very anxious to be here in person, to reinforce the message that Ireland values Germany and our relationship with Germany as a really, really important part of Irish foreign policy and policy development within the European Union. So thank you, and I hope I won't have to use that gavel too often, but knowing that it's there will be reassuring. Thank you, Heiko.
We have a total of 2 questions now, and it's Mr. Scalli's turn.
Derek Scally from the Irish Times.
Mr. Maas, in July, he said in the Security Council on the topic of security and climate that the decisive question was going to be whether we would live up to that challenge. It's going to be decisive for Europe's unity. And do you think that you will be able to face up to that challenge that the Brexit poses?
He says it's nearly finished, the impossible heap. 4.5 years older and wiser about the UK and about certain people in London. Was it always going to be impossible, this heap of Brexit we've been trying to deal with? Thank you.
Also wie die Menschen es einschätzen.
Now, whether people will think that we've done justice to the topic of Brexit or not, we'll have to wait a couple of days and might witness a decision then, because, of course, their judgment will depend to a very large extent on whether we will succeed in reaching agreement with Great Britain or not. And those who will look at the outcome will show little understanding for the fact that the responsible parties on both sides will not have been able to reach an agreement to bridge the gaps regarding Brexit and the impact it's going to have, and to deal with it in the most productive manner. Negotiations are extremely difficult. They take place under the guidance of Michel Barnier, which we've continuously supported. We've been at his side, closely watching his efforts. He's been here more than once. We've been trying to coordinate our actions. And as I said, we will do whatever we can alongside those EU efforts and alongside the negotiations that the President of the Commission is engaging in. I believe that it is necessary in the interest of the citizens of the EU member states, in the interest of the citizens of the United Kingdom, in the interest of civil society, and in the interest of business. This is why I hope that we are going to be successful in the next few days. And should we be successful, I think then general public opinion will be a positive one. We're working hard to ensure that that is the case, because I don't see how we will be in a position to explain to the people that we've not been able to find a way to reach agreement between the European Union and the United Kingdom on an agreement, and that the already negative impact of the Brexit agreement cannot be cushioned.
Yeah, no, thanks, Derek. And after 4.5 years of negotiation, given the complexity of what we're trying to achieve in terms of not only implementing a complex withdrawal agreement, and in Ireland's case, a protocol on Ireland and Northern Ireland as well, but also putting a future relationship agreement in place that goes way beyond trade, This also involves data, services, financial services, energy markets, aviation, road haulage, security cooperation, judicial cooperation, as well as trying to put a platform in place for a trade agreement that avoids tariffs and quotas, as well as obviously putting an arrangement in place for fishing and so on. So this is a negotiation that for the last year has had 11 different work streams dealing with different areas, but all interconnected. And so anybody who thought that this could just be easily closed out on some of the sensitive issues, I think, was never being realistic. I think the negotiating teams have done a fantastic job in effectively signing off on about 95% of that future relationship agreement in terms of text. But it's the last 5% which could result in us getting no agreement on anything. And as people will know, the outstanding areas are still in the space of trying to provide the guarantees needed around fair competition for the future, so that EU companies are protected, knowing that they're not going to face unfair competition from an economy as large as the UK in such close proximity to our market. And so that EU perspective, which was clearly understood a year ago when we had a political declaration where both sides signed up in writing to the need for a level playing field and fair competition now and in the future. The EU wants to see that through. I know the UK have some concerns about elements of that, which the negotiating teams, I hope, are focusing on trying to resolve. Secondly, on fishing, which is a highly emotive issue. Certainly on the UK side, they attach it to perceptions around sovereignty and control, which is very much part of the Brexit narrative in the UK. But the EU, let me tell you, has equally strong views in relation to fishing. And they see it in the context of an overall deal where the UK are seeking access into EU markets in many areas. And the EU, in return, is looking for access into fishing grounds for their own fishing fleets that have been fishing there for decades, within reason and on the basis of compromise. But nobody is questioning British sovereignty here, or British control either. Britain will be an independent, sovereign state in control of its own laws and its own waters. But that doesn't mean, as part of an overall trade deal, that there can't be agreements with that sovereign state to ensure that EU interests are protected too. And that's what we're trying to close out now. It's not going to be easy to do that. And I know there's been a lot of frustration in those efforts. And what I would say is, to politicians, we need to try to dial down the language in terms of the division and the differences of views and focus on the detail, because there is a bigger picture here that goes beyond trade. And that is that in a world that is changing and that has a lot of risk, some of which we talked about in the context of the Security Council earlier, the idea that the UK and the EU cannot put a new, constructive, positive partnership in place in the context of that new relationship. I think that would be an enormous lost opportunity, and both sides will be weaker as a result. And that's why I think the next few days are so important in terms of trying to find common ground, as opposed to stubbornly focusing on differences, some of which is based on perception, and some of it, of course, is in terms of legal text and detail. But look, Ireland, of course, wants a deal for many reasons. We are, along with the United Kingdom itself, the country most impacted by these choices. So we'll continue to work with Germany, but most importantly with Michel Barnier, who's a negotiator that I think has done an extraordinary job, and we have absolute faith in to try and close this out.
It's over to Mr. Heiko for the second question.
Ich habe auch eine Frage.
I too would like to address a question to both of you. Minister Maas, you said that as long as the window remains open, even if it were only a tiny bit, we have to go on negotiating. When would you say will that window be closing? Is that Sunday, or will there be a greater time limit available? You also made the point that the United Kingdom will continue to be a friend and partner of Europe. How are you going to impress that upon people? What are you thinking of in order to highlight that it will continue to be a friend?
If this deal fails at the end of the year, how much time is going to pass before the European Union should start efforts to broker a trade deal with the United Kingdom?
Ja, ich glaube, das ist ganz wichtig.
I do believe that irrespective of the outcome of the Brexit negotiations between the United Kingdom and the European Union, relations remain close. Great Britain is a close ally also on foreign and security policy issues to us, and it is indispensable for us to continue to coordinate closely with the United Kingdom, as we have done and are doing these days as in the E3 format, which will continue to be in place. With Great Britain and France, we met a couple of days ago in Berlin, the three of us, to talk about the future of the nuclear deal with Iran, the JCPOA, and we drafted proposals that we intend to submit to our American partners, which brings me to the second topic of the day, so to speak, the transatlantic partnership, because we believe that new room for leeway will be opened up very soon, and it will be important that we coordinate closely with Great Britain on that question too. We share the same values. We have similar interests around the globe, wherever you look. So in my eyes, it's going to be of the utmost importance to care for and cherish this partnership and to provide a framework for it, as, for example, was the case in the E3 format, has been the case in the E3 format. I very much hope that a solution can be found by the weekend, a result that is. But as far as we are concerned, we would be willing to grant an extension of that time period. That should not be the break it or make it point. What is essential in that regard is that we focus on what is really important, and at the end of the day, it's about a political decision for a compromise and the contents of that compromise. And I think that that point in time has slowly come.
Yeah, just to support Heiko in his views on transatlantic relations, I think 2021 is the moment for a lot more EU proactivity in relation to building a new partnership, transatlantic, with a new US administration. Ireland, and I can remember clearly during the Irish presidency of the EU quite a number of years ago, when it was a big priority to try to find a way forward for what was then called TTIP, the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. And of course, that dialogue effectively collapsed for all sorts of political reasons since then. But I do think that next year will be the time, and we've seen that signal coming from the European Commission as well, which I strongly welcome. And Ireland certainly wants to play a very strategic role in building a new partnership, not just in trade, but in other areas too, between the European Union and the United States, and hopefully that dialogue and that strategic thinking can also involve the United Kingdom. And, you know, I'm a big supporter of something that Heiko has talked about many times in terms of the need for more strategic autonomy within the European Union and more capacity to back that up. But I also think the opportunities that are there now with an incoming new administration in Washington to build a closer global partnership between Europe and the United States is something that we should grasp. In relation to your second question, I don't think it's helpful actually to talk about failure right now and timelines around how and where we pick up the pieces. The truth is that anybody who thinks that no deal now is in the EU's strategic interest, because in 6 months' time when we start talking to the UK, or in 12 months' time when we start talking to the UK about putting in place a new agreement, that somehow the EU's hand will be strengthened. I don't think that shows an understanding of a British mindset, quite frankly. And I think that the United Kingdom will try to make whatever the outcome is in the next few days and weeks of the ending of these negotiations. The UK will try to make that work, whether it's a deal or no deal. And so all of the focus now should be on getting a deal done that both sides can live with and work with, where there aren't winners and losers in this negotiation, but there is a partnership for the future that can benefit both sides. And certainly from an Irish perspective, that's what we're seeking.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay? Now closed. Also ich soll das Hämmerchen nochmal hochhalten. So. So. Can't head over. But...
Is this a suggestion that I speak too much?
No. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Dankeschön.
Okay. Gehen wir jetzt gleich runter?
Okay.
Wo gehen wir lang?